ties and outlined the prospects for further interaction in a range of areas. We've noted positive dynamics in our political dialogue, including at the highest level and at the foreign ministries level, and we are noting our mutual readiness to engage in contacts at every level. We have coinciding views on the need to intensify delegation exchanges, to intensify the implementation of agreements reached by our countries, reached in December 2023 during President Putin's visit to Saudi Arabia, and the consequent contacts with Mohammed bin Salman Al Saud, head of the Council of Ministers. We took a close look at the trade and economic cooperation, noting the positive dynamics in our trade, which is continuing through the first months of this year. The Joint Intergovernmental Commission on Trade, Economic and Scientific and Technical Cooperation is playing a key role in the search for new opportunities to utilize the potential available to both countries. Its previous meetings were held in late 2023 in Moscow, and the next meeting is scheduled for the second half of this year, and it will be held in Saudi Arabia. We are intending to continue our cooperation in the OPEC Plus format. Just as our Saudi friends, we believe that this is a unique mechanism that brings together the leading oil producers, and it is very much needed in today's energy market to balance supply and demand. We are very appreciative of the intensifying tourist exchanges last year. We saw a growth of Russian tourist flows to Saudi Arabia by a factor of 6, and Russians are seeing Saudi Arabia as an increasingly attractive destination. Last year, there were over 30,000 trips to Saudi Arabia from Russia. We believe that the further development of tourism and contacts between business circles will be very much helped by the direct flights between Russia and Saudi Arabia, which will start in October, and the agreement on lifting visa requirements between our countries is being finalized. I also noted that we are grateful to the Saudi authorities for their support in the preparation and organization of pilgrimages for Russian Muslims to the kingdom's holy sites. We welcome our Saudi friends' decision to take part in the Intervision International Music Contest, which will be held on decision of President Putin here in October, and we will be anticipating participation from Saudi artists, and we hope that this will be a regular event. We've discussed the international and regional agenda, paying special attention to the situation in the Middle East. We welcome the ceasefire between Israel and Iran, while at the same time expressing hope that this will be a lasting period of peace, and that it will be conducive to negotiations. And we believe it is necessary to refrain from any actions that could lead to further escalation of hostilities, and that all the differences must be solved through diplomatic and political means in accordance with the UN Charter and with active support of countries who can influence the parties' positions. Russia is one of those. We expect that the leadership of the Arab states of the Gulf and Iran will show the characteristic wisdom and pragmatism to maintain the positive achievements of last year's and to continue developing good neighborly relations, and a decisive role in the normalization of relations between Arab Gulf states and Iran was played by the kingdom's agreement with the Iranian government on the normalization of these relations. As to the Middle Eastern settlements and the Palestinian problem and the situation in the Gaza Strip, we also have matching approaches. We believe that measures to de-escalate the situation are necessary to make sure that humanitarian needs of the Gaza population and in the West Bank are addressed. The talks must resume as soon as possible between Israel and Palestine on the final determination of the status of Palestinian territories. The United Nations resolutions on the creation of a Palestinian state are well known. Russia appreciates the efforts by Saudi Arabia to achieve a settlement in Yemen, and we believe that the path to stabilization through a dialogue between all the political forces in the country under the aegis of the United Nations is a very relevant path, and Secretary General Hans Grunberg's efforts to normalize the situation are laudable. With regard to Syria, we have close positions aiming to achieve a lasting settlement based on territorial integrity and sovereignty of the Syrian Arab Republic. Russia expects Saudi Arabia to be represented at a due level at the Russia League of Arab States Summit to be held in October in Moscow. The dates have already been approved, and we expect that heads of states of the League will be represented at that event. And before the summit, we will have the 8th ministerial meeting of the strategic dialogue between Russia and the Gulf Cooperation Council. And it is scheduled for the end of this year in Sochi. I thank my Saudi friends for their weighted position on the Ukrainian issue and their sincere aspiration to contribute to the achievement of peace, including through the provision of a platform for Russian-American contacts. Our Saudi friends are well aware that a political and a diplomatic settlement is impossible without addressing the root causes of the conflict. As the President of the Russian Federation mentioned yesterday during his conversation with US President Trump, we cannot be satisfied by any outcome that will not consider Russia's legitimate interests in the sphere of security, and that will not remove and preclude the violations of Russian-speaking populations. And the talks we had were very productive. I'm satisfied with the results. And once again, I want to thank my colleague and friend, and I give the floor to him.
Thank you very much, Minister Lavrov. I'm happy to be in Moscow today, and also I would like to thank my counterpart, Minister Lavrov, for this cordial welcome extended to us. During my visit, we discussed the fact that now our cooperation is getting stronger across the board, and it is happening also under unprecedented geopolitical circumstances which require cooperation and deepened cooperation from us. And I also like to note the high level of the development of our relations. And we also collaborate in various fields, in economy, in industry, in culture. And we can truly witness serious strengthening of the ties between our peoples, which is also very important. Tourism flows is growing, number of mutual visits is growing, which will serve as an impetus to developing our ties in various fields. And I hope that in the future we will be able to let our peoples learn the history of each other, and we also continue our cooperation in the field of energy, and this cooperation is very fruitful. And during the talks we also discussed the issues of mutual interest, resolution of political problems via peaceful means, and the use of diplomacy, in particular in the Middle East and across the globe. And we also reaffirmed our common willingness to resolve such issues via peaceful means. And we shared common position in regards of the Palestinian issue. We should make a serious effort internationally to ensure that the Palestinian people get a chance to implement their right to have an independent state in the borders of 1967, and also we must put an end to the Israeli occupation that serves as an obstacle to this. And we need to have two states that would coexist in peace and safety. And we also need to mention the issue of Iran. I hope that Iran will continue its cooperation with the IAEA, and thank you very much. I hope we will continue to strengthen our bilateral relations. Questions? Al Arabiya TV channel, please. Greetings, esteemed ministers. I've got two questions. Minister Lavrov, do you see as possible to hold Russian-American talks in Riyadh, including at the top level, at the highest level? Allow me to answer first.
I will answer your first question. I already said during my introductory remarks that we are willing to consider this hospitable and good-willing platform, like we did at the invitation of our American colleagues when we had a meeting in Riyadh between State Secretary Rubio and the then National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. And from our side, there was Yuri Ushakov, aide of the President. And Mr. Minister opened the meeting and wished us success, and we had a very productive meeting. And we already gave an account of how that went. It was a very substantive conversation without any politicization or ideological slats. And then we met with Mr. Minister and his colleagues to have a working breakfast. And I assume that both Americans and ourselves felt very comfortable. And if there are any other contacts in the future, we will certainly consider Saudi Arabia as one of the possible venues in coordination with Washington.
Thank you. And now I'd like to ask the second question. Esteemed Minister, is it possible to establish cooperation between Russia and Saudi Arabia regarding the crisis in the Middle East, and also de-escalation of the number of crises, including the Middle Eastern issue? Of course, Russia is playing a very serious role internationally, and we can see how strong this actor is, especially at the Security Council, and Russia's involvement in our regional matters is always welcome. We appreciate it. And we believe that it has a positive impact, the one that Russia has on stabilizing the situation in our region. And we also appreciate Russia's position on the Palestinian issue. Traditionally, historically, Russia has always stood for the right of the Palestinian people to have an independent state. Via peaceful process, it has always urged to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And as for the Iranian nuclear program, Russia has always traditionally called for a political and diplomatic resolution of the problem, regardless of what other actors were saying. And we hope that Russia will continue to be involved with this matter, and this would allow to de-escalate the situation and to resolve the differences that the parties have, and to stop the region into slipping into a new conflict, and to save us from this escalation. We support Russia's cause for negotiations, especially on such serious matters that are so serious for us. Good afternoon. I'm from RT Arabic. Minister Lavrov, I have two questions for you. The first question is, Moscow calls for diplomatic solution to the conflict between Iran and Israel and the situation in the Middle East. Is the war between Iran and Israel really over, and what are the risks of a resumption of hostilities, and what role could Moscow play in containing possible escalation?
We very much hope that the so-called 12-day war is now over, and that there were statements regarding this made by President Putin and President Trump, but we would still like to keep track of this situation, because the war party is still very, very active in the Middle East. We are hearing various statements by some members of the Israeli government, and I hope that a shared responsibility will be recognized by European countries. At the recent Board of Governors of the IAEA, with a lack of any clear need, there were clearly anti-Iranian solutions promoted that did not help the de-escalation of the situation and did not help the talks process, but rather served as a pretext. So I hope that our European colleagues will make due conclusions. As to Russia's role, we are communicating with Iran, and Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi visited Russia and had a talk with President Putin. We are communicating with our American colleagues as well. Yesterday, President Putin and President Trump discussed Iran as one of the key issues, and our view was that we must do everything possible to resume the talks, and that is the position shared by Saudi Arabia, and we are continuing to talk about the entire range of issues in the region, including the situation between Israel and Iran. So diplomacy must focus on negotiations, and we will use every means that we have to strengthen this possibility.
And I've got a second question from Minister Farhan, and I will ask it in Arabic, if I may. Esteemed Minister, how does Saudi Arabia assess current developments in the Middle East, especially this escalation between Iran and Israel, and also they say about new countries that may join the Abraham Accords? How can you comment on this, and what impact will it have on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict in general? Thank you very much. First of all, as for the developments between Iran and Israel, of course, we cannot welcome the military solution to these issues, the use of weapons. Parties must meet at the negotiation table, but we overcame that period. We understand that now there are no hostilities, and there is hope that the matter will be resolved via political and diplomatic means. We believe that use of force to resolve political problems must not be allowed. Everything must be resolved via peaceful means. Of course, a political process must be at the helm of our priorities in this regard. And as for the situation in the Gaza Strip, first of all, a ceasefire must be established, and we must avoid the disaster that is happening with the Palestinians in Gaza. As my counterpart mentioned, the same is happening with the West Bank. Some serious developments happening there. Palestinians are persecuted there. Palestinian National Administration is also feeling great pressure exerted on it from the Israeli. And we must achieve ceasefire everywhere to make a durable ceasefire, and then we must make steps towards establishing an independent Palestinian state that would have all the necessary sovereign rights. The only solution, as I have already said, is the establishment of the Palestinian state, which would allow the Palestinian people to determine their own future. It would allow to peacefully coexist with Israel. That's why we believe that one needs to put conflict behind, the use of weapons behind. It is vital to cease fire, and only after that we can start resolving these issues in good faith. And of course we understand, we believe that President Trump can have a positive impact on the situation in the region, and probably he will be able to stop the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. We are hopeful in this regard. Short news. Esteemed Minister, after the conference on the two-state solution was postponed, do you believe it is possible to name a date for such an event in the future? Of course, we are discussing it now with the President of France when such a conference could be held. Yes, it was postponed, but we hope that in the near future we will be able to announce the precise date when this event will be held. Maybe we will do it at the end of the week. But as I said answering the previous question, I believe that now Americans are very actively involved in negotiations with Egypt, with Qatar, to establish ceasefire. And it is important for us to hold this event, and it will have a positive impact on the resolution of the Palestinian issue. And these aspirations of the Americans, we are going to support it comprehensively. We believe it is a priority now. Nadezhda Platsikhina, Izvestia, Minister Lavrov, esteemed ministers, did you discuss some joint efforts or initiatives under the OPEC Plus?
This format operates with the active role of Saudi Arabia and Russia, and it is our country that is chairing the International Monitoring Committee supervising the implementation of OPEC Plus decisions. And this committee plays a decisive role in seeing to it that the voluntary commitments by OPEC Plus members on the volume of oil supplied to the market are observed. So far, our shared opinion is that they're observed at a satisfactory level, and leading to the stabilization of what the oil market and the energy market in general. So we are going to continue our cooperation here, and we agreed to this effect.
Thank you. The press conference is over. Thank you.